Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Economic Times Consumer Products Conclave presented by SAP. We have a very strong program lined up today, and I hope all of us will benefit from the insights from an array of powerful speakers from across the industry. My name is Alokesh Bhattacharyya. I'm senior editor with the Economic Times. I will host today's program. The last 12 months have seen hectic activity of the kind that none of us has witnessed. Nobody has witnessed in living memory, at least. The COVID-19 pandemic, it upended our work styles and our lifestyles. It brought in a fear of infection and death, and it showed us the true meaning of the word disruption in no uncertain terms. So it impacted our lives and businesses equally. Consumer product businesses struggled initially, especially when the lockdown was there. And then they recovered partly thanks to the need for essentials, which they manufacture. But since then, the economy has shown its very strong and slightly unexpected signs of recovery, which is great news. Sales have started to pick up, consumption has improved, and consumer businesses have made fundamental changes to their business models as well as their operational models. We'll learn a lot about what the future holds in store for the industry in today's program. I'm looking forward to all the sessions, and I'm sure so are you. We will start things now, but first we will do the keynote address. For this, I would like to invite Nimisha Jain, partner and managing director of the Boston Consulting Group. Nimisha will outline her vision for the FMCG industry in the 2020s. Nimisha, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Alokesh and Nidhi asked me to talk about, the future of FMCG and what has happened over the last 1 year. I thought rather than just talking about COVID, because we've spoken so much about it, I'll talk a bit about what to expect in the decade ahead. As Alokesh was saying, it's been the year gone by has been a year like none it has been a year like none other. I don't think any of us sitting here would have this time last year if we were asked, would we actually be working from home? Would we be able to do what we needed to do online? Would we never take flights? Would have actually said the probability of that happening is like zero. But it has happened. And I think what's incredible is the way that both organizations and consumers have actually adapted to this new reality. I think what happened over the last year is well known. And so what I'm going to talk about more is to say, in the light of what has happened, what can we really look forward to over the decade ahead? A little bit of rear view mirror gazing. FMCG in India was actually growing at a good clip over the last decade. We'd seen over, depending on the year, between 12 to 15%, 12 to 18% growth year on year. And growth driven both by volume as well as price premiumization. The fundamental drivers of growth have been just very strong economics on the back of affluence, nuclearization of families, and growing urbanization. So very strong macroeconomic fundamentals. However, the last year has changed this pattern of growth. We've seen certain categories like staples, fresh food, hygiene and household care products, personal care, really showing rapid growth. We tracked this very closely every month last year, and in fact, we did specific consumer research across, we did about 5 waves of research to really understand how consumer behavior was changing, and we saw that a set of these categories were showing very, very strong, stable growth. There were a few other categories that actually within FMCG that showed some slowdown, specifically those that required out-of-home consumption. Packaged food and beverage, cosmetic and makeup, which is not visible behind a mask or is not needed when you're at home. But we're starting to see recovery in those as well. What's more important though is to say, how is this going to change going forward? And I wanted to put out for you 9 key themes that we see on how consumer behavior is getting reshaped. I bucket these themes into 3 parts. Trends that are a reversal of what we've seen in the past, trends that are an acceleration, and new habits that were completely unexpected and we've never seen before. The trends that are an acceleration of existing trends are those that we actually believe will continue to exist going forward, because these were already existing secular trends and are just getting further accelerated. And specifically within these is the importance of digital, an accelerated adoption of e-commerce and O2O, greater focus on health and wellness, as well as the rise of what I call the smart shopper, who's somebody who's using digital much more actively as part of his or her purchase process. We've seen over the last 1 year, e-commerce as a proportion of sales going up significantly. We've seen a 30% increase in consumers who actually use e-commerce. And this is an acceleration of the trend to the extent of about 2 to 3 years of the past growth rates that we had seen before. More importantly, consumers who engage in e-commerce are engaging in e-commerce through a much wider basket of categories, including CPG products. From a health and wellness standpoint, while health was always important, the Indian consumer didn't always make healthy choices, either in the food she ate or the kinds of products that she procured. But we've seen a step change in that. The new habits that we're starting to see are what we call a remote way of living, where there's a lot more happening inside the home, a lot more do-it-yourself, whether it's from a personal care standpoint, whether that's spa kits or do-it-yourself hair color and so on. A lot more do-it-yourself in food, where consumers are now cooking a much wider repertoire of products and are using a lot of cooking aids and kits to be able to do that themselves. And then, of course, a much greater focus on hygiene than ever before. We've all been washing our hands more frequently than we ever have, but we've also seen a lot more behavior, whether it's in terms of just health and hygiene becoming more apparent. The trends that we see that may likely get reversed going forward are a much greater focus on larger brands because of just greater trust and availability of those brands. Much more trading down as opposed to before. Pre-COVID, India had one of the highest levels of trading up and premiumization across the world, with over 30% of consumers in CPG actually trading up for superior products, trading up to buy more expensive brands. That has actually gotten reversed with a lot more bargain hunting, a lot more price consciousness. We do believe, though, that trend is going to start to reverse, and we're starting to see that already in the last 3 months. And last but not the least, it's what I call bringing the outside inside, where people are still consuming products that they consumed outside of home, but in larger packs, in stay-at-home occasions. I mean, instead of going to the cinema, they're sitting together and watching TV, a movie as a family, and eating popcorn out of a bag rather than in a cinema. But again, this we expect to go back, because as we speak to consumers, they're very keen to actually get out of the home sooner rather than later. The backdrop of these themes actually provides very important context as we think about opportunities ahead, and as we also think about new spaces and new behaviors that one could go after. One data point I wanted to share is that changing consumer behavior and habits is one of the hardest things and we all know that. Getting them to try new brands, getting them to create new habits is really hard. But in times of crisis and in times like these, actually consumer propensity to try a new habit and try a new brand actually goes up many fold. And it therefore presents a tremendous opportunity to topple league tables and to create offerings that have a much higher likelihood of getting adopted than ever before. As we look ahead, there are many opportunities within the FMCG space. Overall penetration across multiple categories continues to be low, showing much greater headroom for growth. Even categories that are well penetrated have significant opportunity for premiumization, again offering new opportunities for growth. An important element in all of this is the income pyramid in the country, where if you look at the top two segments, which I call the affluent and elite, the affluent are consumers with a household income of greater than 10 lakhs. That segment together is about 12% of Indian households today and account for about 27% of total spending. In the next 10 years, that segment is going to account for close to 50% of spending in the country. And that presents very interesting opportunities and a very different shape of consumption to what we've seen before. What is important as we look ahead is not just to think about winning either at the top end or at the bottom, but really that there is opportunity in every segment. So there's opportunity at the premium end, there's opportunity among the middle class, which is the blue block, and there's opportunity in the next billion, which is the class that is entering the consuming population and buys sachets and lower price point products. And therefore, as a country, we've got now sizable opportunity at each segment, and with a clear set of choices for players to think about which of these to operate in or to straddle across all segments. As we think about India, some of the common beliefs of what are the primary drivers of consumption is that consumption is driven by the youth. It is, supported by rapid urbanization. Men drive a lot of decisions and control the wallet. The reality, however, is that it's actually quite different. It's the middle and older age groups of the population that actually is where both the population growth is going to come. More importantly, that's where today the wealth and the consumption is actually collated. So segments above 35 years of age are really those that are going to drive the lion's share of consumption going forward. The youth are very important to target in terms of making a brand attractive, making a brand cool, and of course there are certain categories where the youth continues to be important, but it is very important to win in the 35 plus, especially in the 35 to 60 year age group. The second thing is that urbanization is not as rapid. We see urban population growing at, or the salience of urban population growing at not more than 1 to 2 percentage points a year. But more importantly, the real growth that is going to come in consumption is really in the tier 1 to tier 4 cities. These cities are going to grow from being about 30% of total consumption to becoming over 42% of consumption. And that growth is a very important space for organizations to capture. Rural continues to be significant, while it's going to reduce in salience from 54 to 42%. In absolute size, it's still very significant. More importantly, rural cannot be viewed as single block. We need to segment rural. And in fact, there are parts of rural which are actually more affluent and more attractive even than an average tier 3 city. So segmenting rural, identifying the key sub-districts to go after becomes very, very important. And last but not the least, my favorite theme is the importance of women. For the first time in the history of India, enrollment of girls in primary, high schools has actually overtaken that of men. What that really translates into is that over the next decade, we will have more women, more educated women entering the consuming class. We will have more working women entering the working population. The presence of working women fundamentally changes the consumption habits of a country. The propensity to spend more on CPG products and to premiumize, the need for more aids and more value-added products, whether it's cooking aids or whether it is personal care products, whether it's beauty products, grows up significantly. And this is going to create a fundamental reshaping of the kind of consumption that we've seen in the country. There are new sources of competition opening up. We see value players at the bottom end of the market starting to become sizable and very profitable. We see unexpected sources of competition like, digital first players, whether in the CPG space or even those providing solutions, who are actually operating in the same demand spaces as the more traditional ones. So the competitive landscape is actually completely different and is going to be very different from what we've seen so far. The go-to-market landscape as well is very, very different. We are seeing traditional trade, modern trade, and e-commerce coexisting for a long time. The relative shape of these is actually going to change. We see e-commerce growing at double the rate of traditional trade going forward, but traditional trade is going to continue to be very significant and to be a mainstay going forward. So the coexistence of these channels is very important. The important question is really not about which of these is more significant, but really to cut this by category and by brand to say which of these channels is really relevant and which outlets within those matter most to your brand or to your category. And therefore, go-to-market is going to become a lot more nuanced and a lot more complex going forward. Each of these channels is going to get more demanding in terms of the need for investment and trade spending, and is going to require a lot more digital and a lot more analytics in the way that they are served, as well as in the way that one spends behind them. So a one-size-fits-all approach cannot work, and really a more nuanced approach is going to be important. Layering on to this, the fact that digital is causing massive disruption in go-to-market models, where we're starting to see B2B e-commerce, for example, becoming a very relevant and widespread channel, which is a real choice as compared to the classical distribution model that players have adopted. Direct to consumer actually coming of age, where whether it is food or personal care, we're starting to see sizable players who are digital first, both building brands much faster and starting to become very relevant with consumers, changing the need for the nature of delivery completely, and the overall logistics infrastructure is changing. So again, what worked over the last decade is not what's going to work going forward, and a re-evaluation of these models starts to become very, very important. On a completely different note, as consumers are becoming more conscious of health and hygiene and wellness, they're also becoming a lot more conscious of the environment and climate change. Players are starting to take very conscious actions in terms of packaging, whether it's about recycling packaging, reducing plastic, and rethinking the nature of packaging going forward is going to become an important element as you take a 10-year view. Employee expectations are also changing dramatically. The need for a reskilled, upskilled workforce, the need for faster turnaround, more attractive career paths, and really thinking about how you manage your team and keeping them engaged and really adapting to a younger workforce is going to become very important. And last but not the least, at every step of the way, technology is going to fundamentally disrupt the FMCG value chain, whether it's blockchain or voice-activated technology or even machine learning. There are, several use cases at each step of the value chain that can provide significant efficiency as well as greater effectiveness in the models that can be adopted. So as I pull it all together, it's a very exciting time and a time like no other. I know it's been a hard year for all of us, and it's been a hard year for many organizations. But it's also, in adversity comes opportunity. And this is a quote from Frank Blake, and it's one of my favorite quotes as I look ahead to say, though the current times are extraordinarily difficult, it is a unique and privileged time to lead. And you have the opportunity to determine how your company will look back on this moment with pride in the next 5 years. And I think this is something that holds true for all of us, whether it's our company, our brand, or even us as individuals, to see how did we use and create opportunity in this adversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nimisha. I find your talks very, very inspiring all the time. Very informative, lot of data. If I go through it, there's so much that I can repeat the entire thing as takeaways. It'll take me another 15 minutes. So I think I'll have to stop there. But really, if there is a big takeaway that I have, from what you've shown, is that what I really liked is the fact that there is still a lot of headroom for growth. Like you said, given the low penetration and that also across all consumer segments. So increasing this penetration, I think, is going to be key for FMCG companies. And of course, the digital first paradigm, like you just can't do without it. It's going to be a top priority for future growth for everybody. Thank you so much, Nimisha, for your time. Thank you for the presentation. Lovely insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So that was Nimisha Jain, MD and partner of BCG India. And like she was explaining, technology is going to play a very, very key role for consumer products industry going forward. So now let's take a slightly deeper look at that in terms of technology. What does the future hold for us? For that, we have with us Ulrike Solander. She is the Global Vice President of Industry Business Unit for Consumer Products at SAP. And Ulrike will now deliver SAP's point of view on the consumer products industry. Ulrike.
Hi, everybody. A warm welcome to all of you. My name is Ulrike Solander. I am from SAP, working in the Global Business Unit for Consumer Products. I will have the pleasure today to talk about SAP's point of view for consumer products. Let me start from our industry position and the transformation imperative we see in this industry. The consumer products industry is really an industry that is in our heart, in our DNA. We have been focusing on this industry almost from the beginning and have earned the trust of this industry in the past decades. We've come a long way together. And when we say consumer products, we mean 6 different segments: food, beverage, home and personal care, fashion, agribusiness, and durables. We have many thousand industry customers around the globe and count about 90% of the Forbes top 2,000 names as customers. We can state that all the famous branded multinational companies rely on us. In terms of numbers, the majority of our customers is obviously in the mid-market segment. But independent of the size, all of these customers trust us for their most complex and business-critical processes, especially for their ERP backbone, like the critical order-to-cash process. And we can proudly say that for this industry, our offering is the industry standard. But in the end, however, this is nothing more than a snapshot. This does not mean at all we can lean back and rest on the success and be anyhow complacent. On the contrary, this is an obligation on our side to be innovative and constantly improve our offering to ensure our industry customers can trust us as well for their future success. Especially, and as you all know, this industry always leads the way in terms of technology adoption and innovation. Furthermore, this is of utmost importance because we see this industry currently in the middle of a huge transformation. We see 4 key areas as the big transformation drivers. The first is that the true cost of goods is not reflected in the price of goods at the shelf, and this is not sustainable. Think about the palm oil usage in this industry, and that palm oil usage has become the leading cause for deforestation. Think about the packaging, all the one-time plastics and the pollution problems caused. Think about the water consumption in the beverage industry. Think about child labor in fashion, and we could go on and on. The industry is a significant driver of many issues around the world, and the world is simply not in a position anymore to continue to bear the cost of all the negative externalities resulting from this business. The industry is more and more pressured by their consumers and new legislations to do something about it, and will need to become circular and stable. Second, this industry has become increasingly interesting for new entrants in the last 10 years or so. We see significant venture capital investment in new and innovative companies that are entering the market at a rapidly increasing pace. And these new players are flipping the growth model from the large established incumbents to the new consumer product startups. The old operating model favored economies of scale, creating competitive advantage and barriers to entry that favored large established brands. Today, the challenge is to meet the consumer in moments of opportunity. And this is all about speed. You miss the moment, you miss the opportunity. Agile, flexible companies that can meet consumers in a moment of opportunity will be the new market leaders. And the focus is more and more on digital commerce, be it direct to consumers or via marketplaces. The third change is the consumer itself. They are becoming more and more selective. A consumer today expects very personalized and digitally seamless experiences within the context of an outcome the consumer is trying to achieve. Outcomes like well-being, safety, joy, comfort. It becomes increasingly important to reach consumers in meaningful ways and not just, this is what I want to sell, but this is what you can achieve. And then to the last point, Today, we have concentrations of very highly educated and extremely creative people that are collaborating to deliver new innovations explicitly to this industry at a passion and pace previously unseen. What matters now are ideas and creativity, and what distinguishes company is not resources but talent. The viability of being able to focus on the best idea and outsource functions like manufacturing, transportation, financial services, legal services, and treat this as a variable cost as opposed to a fixed cost really changes the underlying economical model. It has never been easier and cheaper to set up a viable consumer product business than it is today. Important is only the talent you have to bring ideas to life, focus on simplification, be fast and continuously innovate. And then last year, that was the ultimate change agent. There's a fundamental change if you are on the supply chain side of the industry. This industry has historically been very focused around supply chain and creating linear supply chains focused around efficiency. Now, with the pandemic, it's much more about resilience. It's about understanding risk in the supply chain, gaining the ability to cope with temporary disruptive events by increasing the agility, visibility, and collaboration across the ecosystem. And then think about your personal lives as consumers. Have you used a new business model? Have you signed in for a subscription service? Have you gone to companies and looked for something beyond the product? Whether it is running shoes and you want to get more insights as to how to run and train differently. For all of these things, we have seen significant changes because of the pandemic, and we have seen consumer product companies reacting in ways, shifting their portfolio and delivering services in ways that they have never been used to react before, faster with unique services, unique capabilities. And certainly all of us have made the experience that work today is being done very differently and that working from the office is no longer the norm. And as consumers, how much we value convenience, how much we value things being available, how difficult life has been for all of us. And you really value when a company makes things easier on you. These are all kinds of changes that are coming from the pandemic that are also fueling a greater acceleration of trends already present in this industry before. To successfully compete in the marketplace now, consumer product companies have to balance three different factors. Business model agility, to go for new areas of growth, and at the same time being smart and doing it in an economical way with operational excellence. And they have to add the Creamline into what they do, given the environmental responsibility drive that consumers are largely pushing. We are seeing these strategic imperatives. Providing the personalized experiences and outcomes for the consumers requires end-to-end processes that are intelligent by nature, are automated, and are data-driven. Not just data from one step in the value chain, but the entire value chain. Competing as an ecosystem with trust and transparency means transparency of the entire ecosystem that a consumer products company has, providing transparency where products came from. For example, guarantee that if you say this product is organic, is it really organic? And ultimately, consumer product companies must also deliver the circular economy for a sustainable future. What is our offering for this new world, addressing these strategic imperatives? We at SAP think that a company needs to transition into an intelligent enterprise from a technology perspective to gain the agility, speed, and flexibility needed to successfully compete in this future marketplace. What you see on the slide is our complete offering, supporting the intelligent enterprise. We have the ability to address any potential channel or route to market in consumer products. Whether you reach consumers through big retailers delivering via their warehouses or via direct store delivery, or whether you go direct to consumer, or whether you work more in distributed markets via distributors like in India, or whether you have a food service division, or whether you integrate all the way down back to the farm with origination. We enable the intelligent enterprise, first through a variety of collaborative business networks, including supplier networks, workforce networks, or logistics business networks. Foundational to these business networks are our business applications, made up of the intelligence extended by industry cloud solutions on top of the core. And I will talk more about these industry cloud solutions in a separate slide. The offering is complemented with our experience management and sustainability management solutions. And all of this resides on our business technology platform with data management, analytics, IoT, blockchain technologies, and application development services. The core of the Intelligence Suite offering is SAP S/4HANA, the next generation intelligent ERP solution with built-in automation and intelligence. It has been on the market for roughly 6 years now, and it is the fastest adopted product we have ever seen at SAP. We have already about more than 6,500 live customers, and the biggest single industry is consumer products with about 900 live customers. This is for SAP's differentiation in consumer products. And for each of these intelligent suite processes mentioned here in the boxes in pink color, SAP is making additional investments into cloud-native innovations to extend core capabilities, to include next practices and industry-specific innovations at the vertical edge. Examples of these include extending logistics and order fulfillment with the new logistics business network solution, or building on our historical strengths in trade management with a more holistic revenue growth management, or maybe as last example, extending product lifecycle management with solutions for the circular economy. And finally, a critical important consideration as part of the industry cloud strategy and SAP's capability to accelerate to the vertical edge is our partner ecosystem. You see here some examples of our partners in our industry here. We are solution providers to extend the business process capabilities available through SAP solutions in ways that complement our customers' existing SAP capabilities and investments. Now, how do we deliver these innovations? How do we find out and define where to improve our current, the logos of the member customers? Providing them a platform for peer-to-peer exchange, and are asking them for advice and feedback and looking into joint co-innovation opportunities. Additionally, we have dedicated advisory councils for the fashion segment and for the agribusiness segment. And very often we see customers of these advisory councils as early solution adapters. For example, Hershey. Hershey has already a few years ago decided for S/4HANA as the digital platform and successfully completed a huge company-wide transformation in the finance area. Or Edgewell, a global personal care company, owning, for example, the Schick brand for shaving products. And this industry got already several years ago disrupted by digital innovators offering direct-to-consumers e-commerce channels with low-cost products and innovative subscription services. So Edgewell then quickly decided to compete and use the SAP Commerce Cloud to come up with its own webshop and build direct consumer relationships. Let me maybe add with Shiseido, the global beauty company, or Lion, the brewery and beverage company in Australia and New Zealand, 2 examples from Asia Pacific. They both are on a journey to evolve into the intelligent enterprise with SAP as their partner, using multiple solutions from SAP in this journey. While Shiseido started this journey about a year ago, Lion is already very far. For example, they rolled out S/4HANA to all of the businesses. They are live with integrated business planning for supply chain and use the Ariba network for sourcing, to name a few of their solutions. Finally, I'd like to share now 5 different examples of co-innovation initiatives we have with this industry. And I start with 2 projects within S/4HANA. On initiative of Nestle, we invited 5 more of our big multinational consumer product customers, and you see their logos here, to share with us and their peers innovations they have built outside of SAP ERP in the past as a customer-specific extension, and that they would like to see in core SAP S/4HANA in the future. this is about finding a common ground, defining a standard, and rolling in the additional requirements into development for delivery in future releases. It started with the order to cash process. That was the so-called wave 1. Here the roll-in is finalized and the group is now moving to look into the next process, and they decided for procure to pay. The second one is about the direct store delivery process in S/4HANA. This is the process to deliver not in bulk to retail warehouses, but in small quantities directly to small neighborhood stores. You need system support here to plan the track routes, the store visits, to keep track of the truck inventory, and to settle the tour when sellers and delivery drivers return from the tour. And together with Pepsi and Coca-Cola, we are modernizing this process into a next generation direct distribution process, where we will add flexible distributed order management functionality and intelligent visit and activity management, and extend the delivery process not only to stores, but more general, looking into a last mile delivery, which could as well be delivery to a consumer. This is a multi-year engagement, and the first delivery happened in 2020. With the next examples, I move away from the core and move to this next practice, industry cloud solutions at the vertical edge, which is in high investment area for us, as mentioned before. The first example is material traceability, using the blockchain capability of our business technology platform. The solution was co-innovated with a group of 10 consumer industry customers, consumer products and retail, in a co-innovation engagement and delivered to the market end of 2019. It's a material traceability solution needed mainly by food and beverage, and would typically be a private network owned by one consumer product company. And each network participant will record material provenance data into this blockchain, and the result is the traceability of from raw material batch origin to the finished product. And benefits are obviously increasing the product transparency, a streamlined recall management process, reduced quantities of food waste, and a single source of truth. Important as well is it safeguards the brand reputation. Thanks to integration with the connected goods platform of our technology partners CANTrust, this data can now also be linked to a unique QR code, which is printed on packaging and made available directly to end consumers for full transparency into the provenance of these individual items they just bought. Plus, this unique code can be used for a direct communication channel with consumers. This gives you an example how we extend our solution offering with services delivered by our partners. One of the innovation companies and the frontrunner in using this service was Bumblebee, a US-based seafood company. They tracked the tuna for their high-priced organic brand with our solution from the moment it is caught by a fisherman in the Indian Ocean all the way to the processing plants and to the point of sale. You might remember that I earlier mentioned revenue growth management as an industry cloud investment area. The first small solution we delivered under this umbrella is intelligent trade claims management. In Georgia Pacific and Maple Leaf Food, plus some others, are co-innovating with us here. And the pilot release came to market a few months ago. The settlement of claims for trade promotions, as you all know, is a very painful and resource-intense process with a lot of manual interactions. Using intelligence and automation, this new cloud service accelerates the process and makes it much more transparent. And finally, I want to come back to the circular economy. This is the latest area we started innovating with this industry. We started this around summer last year, and it turned out this is really a hot topic for the industry, and we see a huge interest. We are still in the incubation phase, and as you can see here, many customers aligned with us on the visions and architecture of the different solutions we have in mind. We are aiming to deliver solutions for responsible design and production, and a sustainable materials hub, and looking into end-to-end EPR, extended producer responsibility management. We are currently planning to deliver the first solutions to the market end of this year. So that's all I have today. That was my point of view for consumer products from SAP's perspective, and I hand back to the moderator. Thanks for listening.
Thank you indeed. That was Ulrike Solander from SAP. Some very strong insights there, and of course, a detailed understanding of offerings. One of the things that I noticed both Ulrike in your speech as well as in Nimisha's talk is that direct to consumer is really becoming a buzzing trend for consumer product companies. Traditionally, remember that the consumer product companies, FMCG companies, have operated in a B2B model, right, through distributors and others. But that is beginning to change, and companies need to find ways to get into that model very fast. And of course, adopting the circular economy for sustainability of the environment and for their business also. This is something that is picking up pace. Thank you very much, Ulrike, for your note. Really appreciate taking time out for us. All right, we will now start the panel discussion. And first of all, I would like to welcome my co-moderator from the Economic Times, Suchetana Ray.
Hi, Alokesh. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And allow me to welcome all our panelists who've been patiently waiting. Let's start with a round of introductions. First up, there is Angelo George, CEO of Bisleri International. We also have Tarun Arora, CEO, Zydus Wellness Limited. We also have with us Sanjay Sacheti, Country Manager and Executive Director, Olam Agro India Limited.
There is with us Bhupendra Suri, is the CEO of Creamline Dairy Private Limited, Lalit Malik, the CFO of Dabur India, and Sudakshina Ghosh. She's from SAP. She's the Industry Business Architect, Team Lead, Industry and Consumer Advisory Practice. Thank you, Lalit, Bhupendra, thank you so much. Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, Angelo, Sanjay, for joining us. Thank you, Sudakshina. Suchetana, let's start the panel.
It's lovely to see all of you with such big smiles. It means that the sector is also looking up and it's bright. So before we start today, a short context that Alokesh and I will set, and then we'll dive right into the panel discussion. So while the unprecedented crisis spawned by COVID-19 has had long-lasting impact on the business and people, we were studying a recent FICCI survey that suggests only 18% of manufacturers are looking to add capacity in the next 6 months. What this also means is that the industry does not see full capacity utilization happening soon.
Now, the thing about these surveys is that, whether you look at the surveys or you look at data coming out from the Central Statistical Office or from anywhere, is that data comes with a lag, right? Absolutely. So whatever data you're looking at is never the data that holds true for now. So what holds true for now is something that only you can tell us, the panelists who are here, right? Because you are living in this sector, you are inside the sector, and you know the numbers that are there currently. So hopefully we'll see a lot of improvement there. We do see also a lot of sales, improvement month on month. There's a lot of positive consumer sentiment, but consumer products will have, companies will also need to realign their business priorities to meet the changing customer demands, build, the usual things, not so usual things as well, flexible distribution network, improve the supply chain, focus on, the circular economy, sustainable business practices, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and
yeah.
With that, we will start the panel discussion. And the first question that all of us have, people who are listening in and all of us have, is that, what are the key lessons that the pandemic has really has for you, and what are these lessons that you want to take forward? We'll start with Mr. George of Bisleri.
Thank you, and hello to all my fellow panelists. Quite a few are good friends as well. Well, Bisleri
has a really nice, friendly conversation, Angelo.
For the last 51 years, and we are a symbol of trust and market leaders in mineral water. Now, when you look at the pandemic period, it was important for us to honor this trust that consumers have reposed on us. And how do we repay the consumers? By ensuring uninterrupted supplies of mineral water. So it's critical, particularly to stay hydrated for immunity, particularly when you are not sure whether your water at home is safe or your water filter was not serviced during this period. So our approach during this entire period was centered around a 5-point agenda. One was to ensure that the supply networks are fully active right from day one. Second was to reach consumers directly. I think somebody was speaking about it just now. The Bisleri at Doorstep initiative, which we mounted. The third, we found that there is a lot of consumer fatigue and with negative energy in the environment. So we said our communication has to be humor-laced, some product innovations within the constraints of the period. And to strengthen our approach for the future, we said we will invest in digital capabilities. So let me just share each of them. We have about 150 plants across the country, a well-distributed supply chain network, and close to 4,500 distributors, reaching every city that we speak of. Our plants were operational from day one. Okay, the next day of the lockdown, we were active and working. We had the fortune of being in essential services category, but also we had a lot of collaboration with the stakeholders, with government, police, municipal authorities, to ensure the plants are functional and our vehicles are there in the market to service consumers. Also put in place additional safety features. So that was something which we learned during that period. The second was about reaching consumers directly. Now, at the operating level, there were a lot of ground level issues, and there was also changes in consumer behavior which was happening ongoing, and we had to refine the approach. So we found that in the initial phase, there were a lot of restrictions. So we said 20-liter jar up and down may not work. Let us give 5 and 10-liter jars so that consumers can carry it. Use the shops which are open like pharmacies, milk booths, and vegetable vendors where typically we don't go and service in the past. So those are the channels which got added during the process. But more importantly, we realized that consumers are not able to come out and buy, then we should be going and servicing them. So we put this entire initiative called Bisleri at the doorstep. That you want water, you dial this number, we will reach you at home. Don't risk yourself. And that has been an enormous success. The third one was about connecting with humor-less communication. Ab Ghar Aayegi Bisleri, the same Bisleri at doorstep campaign through humorous. We created 5 humorous digital films which we kind of put into place. And that helped connect with consumers. That it was a refreshing and simple idea to connect. Well, the fourth was some product innovations. We launched, we found that people are looking for interesting products even during the lockdown. And we introduced fizzy fruit drinks. We have 3 brands which went in during the period: Limonata, Spicy, and Fonzo. A bubbly mango drink, a lemon drink, and a spicy masala drink. And also we introduced hand purifiers during the process. The last was about digital capabilities. Now, when I look back, the biggest learning for me was that our Salesforce automation system, which we had put into place in the previous years, really helped us ensure that our ability to service the market was there, and we could adjust our frequencies depending upon the purchase patterns, draw grids in terms of reaching out to consumers, geotag, the vehicles could go out, and we had an analytics tool helping us to refine this on an ongoing basis. Now, as we speak, we have understood that that was not good enough, because once we started interacting with consumers directly, now we realize that we require a marketing automation tool, and we finalize a partner who will integrate all the consumer data, the various touch points that we connect with them into one data archive, and then try and communicate them to them through the media of their preference. So the campaign should become smarter, spend efficiency should increase. All that stuff will happen. And obviously, a lot of our stuff is on the cloud, but some are legacy systems which are on premise. But the learnings of this period has been that maybe we should look at cloud as a universal option, and we are making initiatives on that. That broadly sums up our approach.
Fantastic. In fact, after running through Sudakshina, I'll come to you at the end, because you need to also talk about the technology aspect, and cloud is definitely one thing that I want you to, speak on. But water, of course, is a very strong product. I mean, it's something that it is the elixir of life, right? I mean, without water, we can't survive. And it has also a lot to do with wellness also. So let us move from one wellness product to another. And I come to Tarun. And Tarun Arora of Zydus Wellness. And Tarun, you also have some really very, very strong brands, right? Very popular brands like Complan and, sugar-free, Glucon-D. Glucon-D is a constant presence in my home, just so you know. Yeah, and there are several others like Neutralite, Nycil, and all. How did these products, make it through this this particular crisis? What has changed? Have you changed the way you do your supply chain? There has been a lot of talk about decentralizing the supply chain, making sure that the supply chain is not restricted and that you can source from multiple sources, have multi-tier supply chains. What are the fundamental changes that your business has gone through that you know are not going to change back?
Thank you. My pleasure and privilege to be a part of this panel, and thank you for having me here. Uh, I think this pandemic has come at a time we were just a year after the acquisition of Kraft Heinz business with this Complan Glucon-D acid that we were integrating, and we just run into a very high speed integration doing S4 HANA integration greenfield and several other things. So we had anyway relooked at quite a few things in doing so. But what this pandemic did was made us in particular, but overall industry, go back to the fundamentals. What really is a way of working, and nothing can be taken for granted. What was earlier given had to be relooked at, whether you look at cost structures, ways of working, want to work at home, from home, or have office these many hours, this much amount of travel, health of employees, role of digital. A whole lot of things got challenged in those 3, 4, 5 months, first of all, and then sustainability in several other ways. I think I'll first talk about, you asked me to address the supply chain. I think one thing that hit us pretty hard and we are almost a year down the line after the lockdown was announced. I think what hit us pretty hard was first week of lockdown in March. We didn't know how long was this going to last, what's going to happen, what are the next steps. The lockdown was imposed. Our plants were working except for one where we had to, reach out to the several government agencies and explain that some of our products are essential in nature. Fortunately, the government was also learning and moving and responding very well. So we could keep our plants running, but plants don't mean anything because the entire supply chain had basically collapsed. For almost 2 to 3 weeks, the supply chain had completely collapsed. People were moving back, the trucks were not available, the warehouses were shut. Our distributors for a week, 10 days did not open. And when they did open, they were largely doing over the counter. So what happened was, I think it pushed all of us and over the next 3, 4 months, everyone to relook at the structures. So the whole mindset of saying, I will do it in a 1+2 months, 1+3 month cycle planning, I need to do a certain kind of things. All of that has been questioned, where you don't really need the agility in the supply chain. Has something that has come to fore at a no better way than this, where you need to respond to the demand at a very different level. So there was a collapse in demand because demand existed, but it was sitting there and there was no way to fulfill it. And there was a huge shot up of demand. If you look at it, June, we had a high double-digit growth. Even though some parts we have food service business under Neutralite, which were really short. Some brands were seeing a huge pull. So to be able to address demands which were coming from unplanned areas, unplanned products, or not the regular products. So your ability to respond to the changes that were happening at reasonably fast pace, I think that really pushed us into looking at the whole digitizing of our supply chain. We're working again with SAP since it's the SAP forum in looking at digitizing our whole S&OP model around it with new products from SAP. We believe as we move forward, the whole digitizing of this S&OP will play a huge role in your ability to respond to changes as we go along. And some of these things are going to stick. Fact is that in our journey, we are right now reaching out to e-commerce and modern trade more directly without the distributors. Now they need a very, very here and now requirements. So you cannot work like a distributor has his own buffer stock. I have certain buffer stock in CNF, and the whole chain is far bigger. The buffer across the value chain is much more. With a dependence upon e-commerce, which is almost tripled for us, the modern trade, which will get more consolidated, will demand a lot more. And there's effort D2C, which got mentioned earlier. I think the supply chain's responsiveness, agility will be of a different order. And I think in next 2 to 3 years, organizations which have certain number of minimum number of SKUs will need to digitize at a very, very different pace. And I think that is one piece that is changed. The other is the pandemic also allowed us to, we went back and used this to also test some innovation opportunities around e-commerce and other platforms, because the whole thing changed so much, and it released enough energy in the organization to experiment few things, and we were able to try, for example, chocolates only on e-commerce under sugar-free brand. So it's early stage, but yes, we were able to do a lot of innovations which were sharp channel focused, because channel was gaining scale, and we were able to build ourselves around it.
Right, I'll take the question to Mr. Sacheti. As Mr. Arora was talking about, that this has been a once in a lifetime experience, an opportunity to try out new innovations. So how has the pandemic changed you for the long term?
Well, the first and foremost expectation which our customers and markets had from us was the kind of supply chain resilience which we were able to bring to the table. We are a supply chain company. The model is basically linking farms anywhere in the world to brands anywhere in the world. And we have a business which is not a typical Indian model, but it extends beyond the Indian shores as well. So how did we bring in supply chain resilience during this time was the most critical ask as far as we were concerned. So first is in supply chain resilience, it is about the whole supply chain ecosystem, which means how do you manage the ports, how do you manage transport, how do you manage material handling. These are things where, we had to rebuild the ecosystem during the lockdown, because there were a lot of disruptions in that part. So effective collaboration with all these players. Secondly, how did we link up farms to our factories? That was another one. So putting in place digital systems to monitor farms, to interact with the farmers, guide them with package of practices, which are so important for our sustainability oriented products. And to link them up with our processing setups was something which was very critical. Luckily for us, the farm sector was largely unaffected, I must say that, during this time. But beyond the farms, it was a big challenge. And that's where, our supply chain partners came into play. And the second part, which was very important, and I think that must be true for all the companies here, is about employee engagement, because it was a very challenging time for employees. To keep employees safe was, I think, the number one priority. And that was not for the heck of it. Actually, for supply chain resilience, that is the most important thing which you need to do. So a lot of focus on employee wellness, health, and engagement. So use of digital tools, virtual connect with them, keeping them absolutely safe. And I must say with a lot of pride that out of our 4,500 people, we had hardly 32 infected cases, though all our 15 food processing units worked throughout the lockdown, except for a very brief period of 7 to 10 days. So I think that was the second part. Third was the customer connect and use of digital marketing or virtual tours of our plants, which in a B2B environment is so important to give trust and confidence to our customers, and especially the new customers, because new business development, especially in the B2B segment, is very, very difficult if you have all these kind of travel restrictions. So how do you connect with those customers? How do you communicate with them? How do you create the right marketing tools and communication tools for them? That was very critical. And I must say that, this was the time when the power of the larger corporations with a lot of resilience and presence all across came to the fore. And we were able to gain a lot of market share because of that, because of the customer connect and because of the supply chain resilience which we had. One, due to physical presence, two, due to employee resilience, and three, because of supply chain collaboration, which we had.
Right, very, very interesting points there. And the same question I will take to Bhupendra Suri. And Creamline Dairy, of course, is very famous in South India. and also in Maharashtra, right? It's a leading player there, and so we tend to get a little less insight from the southern parts at times. So it would be interesting to know from you, Bhupendra, what is the scenario there now that there is also resurgence of infections in Maharashtra and Karnataka in particular, right, where you have a strong presence. So, would you say that your changes that have happened must have happened, right, over the past 12 months? They have made prepared you well enough for any kind of new surge that has happened, and what that is happening now, and what are these changes?
Yeah, thank you, Alokesh, and thank you, Economic Times, for providing this kind of a knowledge sharing sessions. And what I would say is that first, a clarification: we are more popular in South, which is Hyderabad, Andhra, and southwards. We are just sort of small footprint in Maharashtra. It's mostly in
Okay.
in the Hyderabad. But the fact of the matter is, yes, the COVID cases have increased, and that starts to reflect immediately in your business, and that we can see that in Maharashtra now because of this lockdowns. We are having that impact. But coming back to this COVID period, this was one industry, and one of the industries, maybe there will be more, but milk being an absolute essential, we didn't stop for even a single shift. So this machine ran continuously through the lockdown, and it's actually quite inspiring and almost humbling to see the resilience of the team. You can imagine the kind of conversations which would be happening in your home, where your family is not too comfortable with the risk you're taking, and you can remember the fear factor in those times. When COVID was at its peak, and that was a time when the team ran the business, I would say, really effectively, efficiently. And this is not just, it's from the farm where the cow's milk to the point where it reaches to your house. It is dropped, that packet comes to your house. This entire process takes 3 days, 2 to 3 days, and from the time of milking to this, and this all has to happen like a clockwork. Even a single days of production, you can't hold production, you can't hold milk for long. You have to, and the cows will give milk, and it'll otherwise get wasted. You have to do something about it. You have to put it through the entire supply chain and do something about it. So to that extent, I think for us, one of the learnings was, you should be ready. You should think about black swan events. Suddenly the demand fell by 30% plus. And once the demand fell, at that point of time, the milk is still getting produced and coming in. And the farmers can't do much about it because they will come in. And, different companies have different strategies to manage that reality. And then you normally convert it to butter and SMP, and you basically break into components. And, when you start to think about opportunities, there's export opportunities. Is our economy geared towards speeding up this export and able to sell this kind of material? So those are the pieces, and I think a learning is think about black swan events, and how would you deal with these? And I would say on the demand side, when 30% of the business fell, we had obviously to go more in home. And that's where the whole thinking behind the team, that how do we reach back to the consumer, because the consumer does not disappear. As Nimisha was pointing out in a presentation earlier, that the consumer is having the stuff, whether they were having it in the office or they're having it at home. So I think that's where the challenge for us is how to get back to the consumer in home, and a certain segment of our business, which was the tea stalls and the big offices, which all shut down, and that demand had to be sort of moved towards the house, and I think that's what we worked on as a team, and a lot of interesting initiatives along that path, and in certain markets where we were very oriented towards tea stalls, we moved towards consumers. So to that extent, the team found answers of how to sell milk and how to reach the homes in multiple ways. And I think that's one piece of the pie, I think. And the other point is that, yes, as COVID cases come and go, the other thing which you're pointing to, there is always that risk, because we think things are now floating smoothly, and then suddenly, Maharashtra has its lockdown, and that puts pressure on the entire supply chain and system. But I think as we go forward, we are learning of how to manage the in-home business, and that's where digital is also coming into play. And there are multiple initiatives which people have talked about, very similar to those, to get back into homes.
Digitization has been a huge theme that the pandemic has ushered. I'll come to Mr. Malik with this question. The pandemic was really a BCP nightmare. So what are the kind of transformations that your company has gone through as far as supply chain and distribution channels are concerned? And of course, has it made you more resilient to face a resurgence of COVID-19 or any other virus for the future?
Sure. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I think you very rightly said that it has been an unprecedented event. So therefore, nobody could anticipate this kind of implications on the business. So therefore, I think that has been a great learning for everyone to be agile, be flexible. As far as we in Dabur are concerned, I think we had two set of categories of products. One was healthcare products and hygiene, and second was in terms of the personal care and beauty care products. So what we did was, I think it was very important for us to take our supply chain, starting from the procurement, going for the manufacturing, transportation, and distribution in a way that which digitalization and technology can help us, number one, to connect from suppliers on one hand to the distributor on the other hand and the employee on the third hand, and ensuring that there is an uninterrupted supply of our raw material products, etc. And to the point that earlier they were talking about in SAP, we also are working very strongly with Ariba to get the reverse auction, and that has helped us to reach out to many suppliers. And not only that, I think it has been also through the technological investments that we have done, not just because of COVID, but even prior to that, we had already taken our transformational journey on digitalization. We have already invested into S4 HANA, B4 HANA, and IBP, which is primarily for our supply chain, to ensure, number one, that we get the right product at the right time at the right price through Ariba, etc. Number two, to ensure the supply is available at the right time, because in some of the categories that we talked about on the healthcare products, our demand actually went up because of the immunity booster ingredients that we had in our products. In addition to that, we also launched new products, and more than 50 products were launched in last 8 to 9 months, which were primarily for health and hygiene. So therefore, how to shorten this whole supply chain, again, the technology and again, the speed of execution, that became the prime focus for us, ensuring that the quality of our process is not compromised. I think that has been a very important area. And I would say the third one I would talk about is also our cost optimization. We undertook a project called Project Samriddhi, where we looked at each and every item of our cost and where we can automate, where we can eliminate, where we can defer. And that's how we went ahead and reduced our costs. So on one hand, we supported in terms of increasing the top line. On the other hand, we ensure our cost is also under control so that we are able to provide sustainable, profitable growth. That is the prime principle that we looked at. Coming on to the distributor side, again, we realized that first of all, we were to support them as our partners in terms of their credit requirements, etc., because there were already a huge lockdown and they were started with this inventories, etc. So we ensured that their inventories are addressed. We ensured that their cash flow issues are also supported and taken care of. We ensured that availability of supply and the knowledge through the digital media that we, the process that we had, is also available to them so that we can reach out to them. Even on the supply chain side, we tied up as a first time with Swiggy. We tied up with even the newspaper vendors to ensure the point that earlier panel colleagues mentioned, to reach out to the consumers. So that's how we strengthen our supply chain. We introduced new products. We introduced our technological support, so that we are able to stay connected with them, get the feedback, and ensure that the supply is available for all our products. And last but not the least, we used our digital communication media to reach out through e-commerce to all our customers and get their feedback to ensure the success of our all new product launches that we did. So I think all these measures put together has helped us to convert the challenges into opportunities.
Thank you. In fact, there are so many wonderful insights coming through. And Sudakshina, you must have, there's a reason I come to you last, because you're the technology person. And now that you've heard everybody, bulbs must have been going on in your head. Ki yahan pe, we can do something with technology. Here we can bring in improvements through technology.
Sure.
Angelo also mentioned about the cloud. So basically, if you could give us an influencer idea, because you're an industry observer, you're an advisor, you're also an
Right.
influencer in the changing, actions and growth path. What are the trends that you see in the industry that you believe will hold true for long? And also
Sure.
tell us a little bit about the role of the cloud.
Right. So, and thank you so much, the ET team for having me on the panel. For me, I was just listening to everybody's conversations and I was noting down so much because, all the points that were brought up, right, from Mr. George to Mr. Arora to Mrs. Sacheti, and then, Mr. Malik and Mrs. Suri. There are so many customer examples, that I would like to share. So the point that you brought out, Mr. Arora, in terms of, the first focus of business continuity planning being assuring the safety of employees, right? And Mr. Sacheti, you also referred to that as that being a core part of how we are doing the supply chain management as well. So that is what we first saw happening, right? When the lockdown happened in March, similar time last year. We saw most companies in an effort to sort of drive their business continuity plans. The first thing that most of our customers really wanted to do at that time was to really ensure that their employees were safe, and for customers who had essential operations to ensure the safety of the workers across their production locations. And there were a lot of innovations that we saw during that time in terms of ensuring that there are designated zones and social distancing norms were maintained, the biological checks for all of these workers. And during that, it was really a hotbed of innovation. So in addition to employee pulse checks, we actually came out with in partnership with some of the startups who are actually being incubated by SAP labs here at Bangalore, we actually could come out with solutions that were intended to just drive better safety and more adherence to COVID-related norms on the shop floor. And we did see some customer adoptions in India as well. So that is the first point which I wanted to highlight. In addition, there was a lot of focus on quick learning and skills building related to whether it is digital presence, digital selling especially, and we saw a lot of customers come to us in terms of digital customer service was a very important area for which there was a quick upskilling requirement that was seen. And we actually had to partner with some specialized companies who could actually provide that content through integrated HRMS and learning management platform. Sales, generating recommendations for customers, given the sudden changes in demand and everyday evolving profile of the demand that was coming from across different channels. So that was the other very interesting trend that we saw coming from a technology perspective, is the quick upskilling of employees and being able to make some of this digital and virtual presence and selling and service related content available through an integrated platform. Of course, the second most important part, which everybody talked about, was the supply chain. And of course, there was a lot of disruption that we saw for a lot of our customers in terms of, the globe, especially in the pharma value chain. We saw that where there was a lot of disruption related to the sourcing of the raw material, right? So for that, what we again saw is a lot of companies wanted to do a quick pulse check for their suppliers to really understand their ability to meet the demand over the next couple of months, right? So that was the first thing that we saw. Second, what we saw was, and obviously, global supply chains, the way, especially in the FMCG industry, which runs so much on efficiencies, like bringing the best product to the shelf at the lowest cost. The supply chains are global in nature, and they have been optimized to a large extent with, absolutely the most cost optimal sources of supply being identified. There was gradually a trend, a move away from there to also having one or two additional alternate sources of supply, and how to identify new suppliers through a network-based approach. Mr. Malik referred to the Ariba network, right? So of course, this is a network play where, once you put your requirement up to a marketplace, you also need to have qualified vendors who are actually coming and bidding for that requirement, right? And we saw a lot of interesting use cases for this, whether it is in terms of sourcing COVID beds, for example, to sourcing ventilators, right? A lot of these requirements initially in the early days were actually put up and sourced by SAP customers using this vendor network. And later, of course, it went on to understanding what kind of supplies are available and creating these alternate sources of supply while still being able to keep the costs at an optimal level. So that required a lot of understanding of the costs that are embedded in the supply chain, right? And of course, the sustainability element comes in terms of what is really like, Ulrike mentioned this in her presentation, where she said that, globally with customers, trying to be more local in terms of their consumption habits, and also sustainability becoming a core element that drives businesses, right? The understanding the carbon footprint of a product that is available at the retail shelf, that is very important. And, while we're looking at a future where there are carbon markets, right, and we really are moving towards more sustainable practices. So that is another thing that we are gradually starting to see in terms of companies really trying to understand the carbon footprint at each and every element of the value chain. The third thing is, of course, the direct to consumer part, for which we saw a lot of companies, who wanted to just create these storefronts. And I can give the example of Frito-Lay, where, a storefront, a DTC channel was created within 30 days. So these are some of the, most important consumer trends the trends that we have seen emerging with our customers.
Right. Absolutely. As you mentioned, sustainable growth with sustainability in mind. Well, thank you, Sudakshina. You actually summed up this section of the conversation for us very well. And now it's time for us to delve to the other topic that we have in hand. Now that we have an understanding of the way forward, let us see what the challenges the industry still faces. And for that, we'll first do a poll with an audience. Could I ask? Yeah, thank you so much. So as you see on your screen, there is the first poll. The question is, what according to you are the biggest challenges faced by your organization post-COVID-19? It's a multiple choice question. The first option is shift in consumer buying patterns. Second choice, managing erratic consumer demand and supply of raw material. Third choice, managing cash flows and profitability. Fourth, cyber attacks and business disruption. Finally, all the above.
Looks like all the above is coming out tops. There are a lot of challenges still there. Remember that we have, an audience that are also senior people from this industry, right? So their feedback is quite interesting and important also for us to understand.
And, in half an hour of discussion so far, we have almost as many questions that have come in.
So we have about 50% audience already voted. Managing cash flow seems to have been resolved, huh? Tarun, would you say that's something that you don't have to worry about so much?
Yeah, from my own perspective, I think cash flows are today far better than what we faced at the initial phase. Actually, beyond a certain point of time, we've not really seen very serious cash flow issues, at least for our business.
Okay.
So it's only getting better. So, I mean, business as usual as far as that is concerned.
Okay, the answers are in. Cyber attack is very low in the priority order, in the order there. 46% say that shift in consumer buying pattern is the biggest challenge, followed by managing erratic consumer demand. So it's the consumer who seems to be, and understanding the consumer, which seems to be the biggest challenge. Yeah, Alokesh?
That's what it looks like from the audience poll. Now let's go to the panel and ask what they feel. Do they agree with what the audience is saying?
Some of the questions are actually about brand and understanding your consumer better. So I'm guessing for the audience also, that is the primary concern here. Who would like to take it first? Tarun, you want to take a go at it?
Sure. So I think I alluded to part of it. I think what has happened is the lockdown pandemic, it's really forced everyone to relook at their existing behaviors. In the first couple of months, and when people were, the fear of this pandemic was more than the impact of it. We've seen over the later months, the impact became more, but people learned how to deal with it better. And today, even when the so-called second wave probably is coming, people are handling it with far more ease, sometimes not being even doing what they need to do. I think one of the things that people realized was, while the healthcare sector, the doctors will come back with solutions, the best solution to them was they're taking care of their own health. And therefore, the food became the medicine. The healthy habits, the hygienic way of life was the best protection against, the infection. So clearly, consumers went back and said, look, what do I need to do to now, protect myself against something that I don't know how to deal with? And even the doctors are also learning. So even the doctors didn't have all the answers. The protocols were being, solved. There were, I'm told, research papers. We're part of a pharma group. So I heard there were, how many million papers that got published, because doctors were learning, the whole world was learning. The only solution people knew was people with a higher immunity, better health, had a better chance of survival versus the ones who were weaker or had comorbidities. So clearly, if I ate right, if I maintained my health, if I ensured hygiene, I have a better chance of survival. And that's when consumers went back and said, do I need to change what I do? Of course, the lockdown and several other things also forced consumers to change. And that brought in a certain review of what I eat, what I do whole day, how do I manage myself? So health has suddenly become, and health, not just by the healthcare sector, but in the food, in everything I do every day, became a primary importance. So people read the labels, back labels far more carefully. How much protein, how much vitamin C, how much zinc in my food? Am I having the right medicine? I'm sure Dabur guys would have seen how much suddenly Chyawanprash becoming more important.
Absolutely, yes.
You live with those immunity perspectives, but suddenly these, it wouldn't have sold so much in summers earlier than it did now. So everyone relooked at the ways of, what they consume.
Yeah.
And some of these behaviors are going to stay, that the food is going to become far more conscious, item in the list, where people will be willing to pay more. The trust has become extremely more important, that I trust these products. So the loose products came under more pressure. Hygiene products came more important. So some of these things happened at a pace which would have taken probably a few years, sometimes a decade to happen, happened very quickly. And those things, I think, unleashed, of course, and a whole lot of us went back and said, if the consumer is going to change, how do I respond to it? I think Lalit was mentioning, I heard other people, gentlemen also responding to it, that there is, George was also talking about something, that consumption was changing. Everyone went back and said, okay, if the consumer is changing, what do I need to do? So I think consumer piece, both from innovation opportunity and the erratic demands, and how do I ensure my availability to them, became the pivot of change in the organization.
Looks like the entire industry is in sync with what you're thinking, because even the audience said much the same thing. And now that you mentioned Lalit 3 times during your answer, I have to go to Lalit. And so Lalit, we were chatting up yesterday also, and you reminded me that Dabur is still is sticking to the conventional model so far, right? Of the B2B model of distribution, and direct to consumer is still on the lower side. But is your biggest challenge, matching and in sync with what we are hearing here? Is it still understanding the consumer your biggest challenge, or is it cash flow profitability? Is it supply chain bottlenecks? What is the thing that's worrying you the most?
I think I would say the answer that says all 5 are relevant and important, I think I will go with that. But yes, I think when everybody is giving more importance with regard to the consumer preference, I'm just reminded of that saying which says that normally every individual juggles between 5 balls. And the first one is career, the second is health, third is family, fourth is friends, and fifth is spirituality. I think lockdown has made people think about health as one of the important things to my friend Tarun that he was talking about. So I think, yes, people have put more importance now on their health as well as on their family. And they are trying to reprioritize their own mind, and they are trying to work towards it. Therefore, I think as a priority, perhaps it comes as a top priority. Coming to Dabur, I think we have done a lot of changes in terms of direct to reach through e-commerce. In fact, our e-commerce has increased as a saliency from 2% to almost 6% now. We have introduced new product through e-commerce, digital, and also we have done a lot of direct supplies to even modern trade as well as to CSD, etc. So I think the pattern has certainly undergone a change. However, I would just like to draw attention to one aspect which was the lowest in the preference, which is the cyber attack. Now, one thing which my view is, and I'm also Joint Chief Risk Officer, so I would say that we should not underestimate that, because in this lockdown, people have started using a remote connection in a very extensive manner. And when you use technology in a very detailed and an extensive manner, and that is going to stay, I think the importance of cyber security should not be underestimated. That's my view, because tomorrow, if anything can happen, it can disrupt the business. And we have seen some of the examples in the past where, without naming them, that there has been disruptions in the businesses. So therefore, I think though in priority, we may still talk about consumer preference, but the cyber security again cannot be underestimated. Coming again from finance perspective, I would say the liquidity and profitability, though it has improved substantially, and we can say that we are on negative working capital, so it is very positive. But we should also continue to keep focus on that, because today inflation is again jacking up. So therefore, I think in priority, I would agree with the consensus, but I would also request that other areas are also very important and it can become very significant in times to come. So we should not close our eyes or give less preference to them. That's my little long answer, but
no, absolutely very valid points you raised and very important points, Mr. Malik. You will not be very surprised to hear that very recently, Economic Times with Cantor did a CXO survey. And this was done last year, wherein one of the biggest concerns was cybersecurity. But when we ask these companies where they're investing, you'll be very surprised that cybersecurity actually is much below the pecking order there. So it means it is, as you mentioned, it is a huge concern, but do we see investments happening there for companies? Maybe not, at least not for the companies we had surveyed. I'll come to Mr. George with this question. Here we're talking about shift in consumer buying patterns. We're talking about erratic consumer demand. Do people change their habits when it comes to drinking water? If not, then what is your challenge?
Yeah. While we assume that an item like water would be consumed at a certain quantity and a certain frequency, I think somewhere, let us say the consumption is also governed by the access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite an experience for us in the beginning, because the buying habits kind of evolved during this entire period. We found that people didn't want to really travel out to buy anything. They would rather shop very close to their home. The ticket sizes would go up because they would reduce the frequency of purchase. They would buy in bulk. And as far as possible, they would like somebody else to deliver it at home and move on to online shopping. Now, all this really impacted the consumption to an extent that, for example, if I look at water, our consumption, a significant chunk is also in terms of travel, recreation, entertainment driven. Obviously, those took a hit during this period. But it doesn't mean that after the first 2-3 months, these sectors kind of opened up. And people were having some kind of a get-togethers after an August, September kind of a period. And one of the challenges for us was really about trying to make the product available at the right time and respond to this demand. So, I mean, just to put in point, we used to call it a mohalla-based approach you required in terms of your ability to service them. So we had actually developed a distribution model, a hyper-local kind of a model, which we call it as a mohalla distribution model, so that you're able to quickly respond to a variation in demand. And that's something which we had to put into place. I spoke about Bisleri direct to home. During this period, we also discovered that don't try to do everything yourself. There are equally competent partners who are there and whom you could partner. And there were these delivery systems which are already established by certain key players. We said, we'll piggyback with you. And that was a very fruitful association for us. In one of the towns I recall, we were struggling to deliver water at a frequency of 24 hours. An order gets placed on our e-com, our reassurance is 24 hours. Our guys were struggling with it. There comes this partner, we get in an agreement with him, he delivers it in 3 hours. So I think during this entire pandemic, the other learning for me personally has been, there was a great amount of collaboration within the industry and outside the industry, that people could work together and bring those benefits, ultimately benefiting the consumer. In fact, I'm actually not surprised that people were talking about consumer habit change as the first item, because this is a consumer driven industry and that is where it should start with. But equally, I think supply chain systems will need to keep getting geared for this variability in demand, as I call it.
Correct.
Water should be a predictable pattern of demand, but no, there is a variability in demand, which even we find.
Very true.
Absolutely. And, very, very good points there. And also, of course, the fact that you partner means that you stick to your knitting, right? You stick to what is core and what you are best at.
Absolutely.
And
Somebody is better at doing something, be with
let them
him.
do it. Yeah, exactly. Is that the way that you would also handle it, Bhupendra? Because, when it comes to challenges, is it, and I'm coming to Sanjay after this, because Sanjay, you're totally B2B is what you told us, right? So we'll probably get a different view of your challenges from what the audience has just told us. But I want to understand Bhupendra's model, and are your challenges still about customer understanding? Are you getting into partnerships? It is, what are the key concerns now?
So I think I would say customer understanding is still the biggest challenge, and understanding is not the right word. I think the customer has shifted. The customer has decidedly shifted in many ways, and I think COVID is going to leave its mark over in the long term in that sense. So let's say indulgence at home. People talk of health, but people also looking at indulgence at home, and it's also the fact that people are not going out and they also want to enjoy and have a good time. So to that extent, we see sweets, paneer, we see a particular trend there. And so when you look from different ways, it may be like, for example, what's going to happen on work from home? My sense is, I don't know whether many companies may think about whether they need to have the offices at all, or how do they want to deal with this reality, because you can see the big cyber parks in Hyderabad and in big cities like with nobody there, and things are going to change there also, and they're not going to go back very easily exactly to the place where we found them or had them before. And I think that is going to lead to the way you approach the market. I mean, the market has changed, the dynamic has changed, the consumer has changed, the consumer interacts with your products, but in different ways. And so, I mean, those are long-term trends and they are going to be there. But I think the interesting other part is like farmer. And I'm bringing the farmer in because we guys deal a lot with farmers. We collect milk from 1.2 lakh farmers a day. And there are lakhs of farmers, small amount of milk which collects. And that's how you get your milk at your doorstep. Now, we are going backward and integrating digitally with the farmer. So we are having about 6,000-7,000 farmers, and we are increasing the number of farmers to whom we have direct access. I mean, every day morning, what quality of milk comes in, it gets measured, it's online to us, and it is helping to get visibility to the farmer and help the farmer to increase their yields. I'm talking from a technology perspective. And somewhere, because the supply chain was disrupted and can get disrupted, they're a little short term. I would say supply chain disruptions are a little shorter term. But let's say what happened this year. There was excess, like I told you, excess of milk coming in COVID and no demand. What to do with the milk? Prices fell. Now the farmers felt that if the prices are low, then they will not feed the cattle well, or they will not treat them well. And as a result, you would have, and they will move away from dairy farming. And that will result, now we are in a shortage. As I talk to you today, there's a shortage of milk. The prices are moving up because we are not getting milk. I'm worried about the supply chain of milk going forward. There's a lean period which happens in July, August. So these are short-term disruptions which have happened, and simply because of the way that the market and the consumer is. So when you say 2 points there, I say consumer patterns. There's no second thoughts. It's a long-term change, and a lot will be impacted. And the second is the supply bases which have been affected. It will take some time to stabilize.
Right. As Mr. Suri said that the customer has decidedly changed. I'll come to Mr. Sacheti. So has your customer in a B2B business also decidedly changed? If yes, how much, and what are your challenges now going forward?
So Suchetana, in some ways, the customer is changing. As I mentioned earlier, they are looking at a much higher level of supply chain resilience. somewhere in the questions which you did put up, one of the points referred to the supply of raw materials. So if you look at today the food supply chain, it's a global supply chain. While India produces a large part of the basket of commodities being consumed in India, but a good part of it is also imported. So, but that global supply chain has been disturbed because of COVID. There are disruptions all along the supply chain. You have a huge container shortage today. So just to give you an example, so moving material out of India or getting into India, both is a challenge. Freights have more than tripled. Now imagine the kind of impact it has on your customers and their budgets and their ultimate product pricing. So how do you have control over the supply chain? How do you have the right alliances and the right collaboration across the supply chain? And how do you take it to the next level now? In the post-COVID scenario, that is a big challenge as far as we are concerned. But at the same time, I must say that it is a great opportunity because of our presence, because of our footprint, because of the extent of ownership of the supply chain. And what I mean by that is the extent to which we are linked to the point of origin and how near to the point of origin we appropriate the material. That is something which is now determining the resilience of our supply chain. And thereafter, how do we manage all the processes till the delivery to the customer wherever he is? That is becoming a critical success factor, and that's where a lot of investment is going in. So that is one part. The second part, and obviously, the consumer goods companies would talk about it, about the consumer attitudes. This is a trend which has been playing out for a long time, but has got accelerated because this has come into the center of consumer conscience today. So what is the food I'm consuming? Where is it coming from? What is the impact it has on the planet? What is the impact it has on the farmers who grow it? And who's bringing that food to me? And how good is that supply chain is something which is now becoming more and more into the center of the conscience of consumers. And that's where the traceability and sustainability aspect is really becoming very, very important. This is a trend which is probably playing out a little slowly in India, and understandably, we are a $2,000 per capita income country, and we can talk about these issues only to a certain extent. But globally, this is a major trend which is there, and that's where companies like us are investing disproportionately in creating these traceability, sustainability programs. Very importantly, digitalizing them, because that's very important for the authenticity of your traceability programs and the impact which your sustainability related initiatives have on the farm and the supply chain thereafter. So we have come out with a program called @Source. @Source is it's a 3-tier program with different levels of rigor. And the third level is @Source Infinity, which provides to the consumer the impact which our programs create on 90 sustainability parameters for any particular product which is grown at the farms. So how do you digitalize this entire thing? How do you demonstrate the authenticity and the goodness of that to the customer, and how the customer uses it for their consumers? That is something which we feel is very important for us to differentiate and create a position for ourselves. So that's the second part. Third part, which I'm still looking for answers. I happen to live in the most polluted capital of the world. We could see as the crow flies 7-8 kilometers.
Many of us share that trait with you.
Yes, absolutely. So during the pandemic, as the crow flies, we could see 7-8 kilometers for the first time, and that was a delight. I saw a lot of photographs where Himalayas were seen from places where they were last seen 30 years back, right? So this is something which has again changed. And my feeling is that this is something which will ultimately bring again to the center of conscience the whole issue of climate change and the pollution levels which are there in India. It is a trend. I don't know when it will play. It is a latent issue today, but it will definitely become an active issue sometime. And that again brings us back to the sustainability part, the water use efficiency, which today in the West, our consumers are really giving us a premium if we are able to demonstrate that our farm programs have a high level of water use efficiency. So water use efficiency, I feel that over a period of time, given what is happening in the sub-Himalayan ranges in India, that will be a big differentiating factor and a big customer expectation as we go along. I am yet to see that from Indian consumers, but overseas consumers today, consumers in Netherlands, consumers in Australia, they are willing to pay a premium for that. And if we are able to provide them material, raw material, which is so sustainably produced, which has the climate impact related goodness and water use efficiency related goodness, that is clearly a differentiating factor. India will catch up. We see some initial signs of enthusiasm from our CPG customers. And that is just probably the starting point. And that's a challenge and more importantly, an opportunity for us as we go along. So these are the 2-3 things which we see. Fourth one, which I would say is with the whole farm distress, which has come to the fore during the pandemic. It was a confluence of a few factors, but let's associate it with the COVID. How do you make the farm sector strong? How do you make farmers more resilient, more capable, and more resourceful to be able to deliver what the consumers want today? That is very important. So how do you collectivize farmers? How do you organize them across farmer groups, farmer societies, and farmer producer organizations? That is something which is again going to be a big challenge and again a big opportunity for corporates. Right. I lead the core group on farmer producer organizations in CII. I see instantly about 10 of us, 10 companies have come together. We have adopted more than 50 FPOs. Each FPO would have 500 farmers. So you see the multiplier effect which is there. And we provide them complete market linkages, input linkages, and a capability development program. This is something again for supply chain companies like us who are connected all the way to the farms is pretty impactful, and that's an opportunity which will happen. Again, we are working on digitalizing this entire interface. Farmers, FPOs, sponsoring companies, CII, or the government CBBOs. So how do you digitalize this entire thing to bring in the necessary efficiencies and to maximize impact? That is something which is another opportunity which I see over a period of time.
Thank you. And quite a few interesting and very, very interesting thoughts. And what is also, Sudakshina, what is also coming through is, of course, that the understanding the consumer and getting a better grip of that part is important. Supply chain resilience is another critical thing. Debottlenecking and localizing the supply chain to mohalla levels, right, is an incredible thing. And sustainability also. To you, what do you see as an observer? What to you is the single biggest challenge that the industry faces?
So it is exactly. So it's very interesting for me to see how the discussion panned out, right? From the poll, we found that understanding consumers is the most important thing for this industry. Towards the end, we realized that fulfilling that demand that is coming from consumers, however varied it is, however, wherever it is coming from, however hyper-local it is, that is also equally important. So for me, that was very interesting to see the entire trend. From what we are seeing, I'll come to a few of the agri topics that Mr. Sacheti said, and it's great to see that, the way we are trying to go more closer to the source in terms of just understanding consumers across various different channels. So, or how does the consumer journey get orchestrated in an omni-channel environment with a lot of seamless online and offline transactions and interactions. So whether it is, buy online, get it delivered to a contactless delivery with a seamless returns process, whether it is, you buy online and it is fulfilled at the local store, or it is a buy online and a curbside delivery. All of these models are things that at least our retail customers are trying to adopt. Also, while a lot of the FMCG customers have their products available on the large marketplaces, what we're also seeing is globally brands do want to have their own stores, their own commerce storefront, which caters to B2B, B2C, and B2B2C scenarios as well. So these are three very different scenarios from an inventory management, product data, incentives and commissions management sort of a scenario. But the fulfillment, if your demand is aggregated for these three environments, and then you are managing your inventory, you're managing pricing, and you are managing fulfillment from a single source, that drives the highest amounts of efficiency. So that is what we are seeing. The other very important thing that we are seeing, and this is piloted by some of the leading consumer products companies in India, which is their the managing the customer data and customer consent on an ongoing basis. Right. Like, while some of this is driven by GDPR, but with the Indian consumer data privacy law, which also draws a lot from GDPR, managing a consumer's consent, managing what time she wants to be contacted in, at what channel, these are very important, and you have to continue to do it on a very regular basis. Every quarter, you have to actually get the consent. So managing this customer consent, customer data to get a unified profile of the customer is the other biggest area that we are seeing. Things like social media listening, omni-channel marketing campaign execution, these are now hygiene, par for course. There are lots of technology providers in the market who can provide you solutions. But some of the other things that I mentioned are the ones that really are the differentiators. And so, Mr. Sacheti, to your point, another interesting use case that we are seeing from a farmer perspective are, one is most of the companies who are either in the fertilizer space, or FMCG companies who have a direct contracting agreement with farmers, they're really getting into this area of smart farming, whether it is in terms of, understanding the soil profile, being able to give guidance to farmers in terms of, what inputs to use, giving them loans, financing, machinery on a shared basis. Those things are also very interesting use cases that we are seeing coming up with different companies.
Sudakshina, it's such a pleasure listening to you. The enthusiasm that you're bubbling with. Clearly, you're speaking very passionately. But it's time for another poll that we wanted to take, and we'll come back to you, Sudakshina.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. So this is the second poll. The question is, what would be the key priorities for your organization to drive growth using technology? The choices are real-time visibility into financial health of the organization. Robotic process automation is the second option. Direct-to-consumer omni-channel commerce is a third option. Then there's migrating to cloud to ensure business continuity. All the above.
The consumer has really taken up a lot of mind space. And Sudakshina, I'll come to you first on this, since you are talking about technology, and the question is also on technology. Essentially, we are looking at, I think we've got a fair sense of what the audience is thinking, but tell us, in brief, what is your take on this response that we've just seen, and what are the areas that you feel that the consumer companies should focus more in terms of technology integration?
So, of course, direct to consumer is, we all agree that it is a very, important way to capture this new source of demand, and this really shift in once in a lifetime shift, accelerated shift, we can call it whatever we want, but shift in consumer behavior that is happening. However, a couple of the other things which came up, so for example, robotic process automation, that is a big source for driving efficiency across the organization, really. And the story that we take to customers is an intelligent enterprise should have a lot of this automation and intelligence already built into your business processes, right? Which will enable you to drive those efficiencies which actually remain in pockets within the organization, whether it is, customer master data management, or, reading structured and unstructured data and driving insights from it, right? All of this would require some of these enabling tools. But yeah, so the other big thing that we are seeing is, of course, a shift to the cloud. cloud, primarily from not entirely from a cost perspective or reducing an upfront capex perspective. It is also a movement to the cloud where you keep your your basic business logic core simple, and you continue to drive a lot of the innovations surrounding the core and keep on extending the feature functionality of your of say a supply chain, or say a financial performance management tool, or a learning management tool, or a direct to consumer commerce storefront. These become the innovations that are actually being rolled out by technology companies such as SAP in these areas is very fast, right? Almost every quarter, new functionality is brought to market, right? So in a cloud sort of an environment, it becomes much easier for customers and new adopters of technology to actually leverage these new innovations that are coming to the front. So rather than looking at it from a point of view of reducing upfront capex and making it an opex sort of an economics, the economics is more in terms of drive growth through disruptive innovation that a cloud-based sort of a technology architecture can really provide. That is how I would want to just summarize it. Yes.
Okay, I'll come to Mr. Arora with that question. The question here is that, the power of digital technologies has been amply highlighted, underlined, underscored in the consumer products industry. But for you, for your company, what are your technology investment plans going ahead?
So for us, and I was reading some of the, how consumers or how people reacted. For me, if I were to look at it, some of these things are not necessarily in the same priority as the, votes have come. For me, D2C is important, but not the highest priority. Some of the things is, I think the fundamental business processes and analytics and digitizing them is far more important, and creating a common way of using and capturing data at early stage, lead matrix, using digital to build a lead matrix of business is very, very important. So when we say, using digital to, one of the points was to improve their financial health. It's not just the financial health, the overall business health of the company. And it can mean from a consumer perspective, knowing what is consumer saying, to what are my raw material prices coming and tracking those over a period of time versus my supply chain. So putting the entire value chain on a digital platform so that I can use analytics to take sharper decisions, which help me respond to the consumer needs or the changing business environment needs far better. So therefore, most of our investments are in building up infrastructure for that. From the Salesforce point of view, I have 2,000 people. So we're enabling them to have not just the handhelds, but also AI-enabled, selling aids, where they are able to, have the data for last 3 months, 6 months for that outlet, and able to suggest that this is the last pattern in your offtakes in your store. And therefore, I would recommend, while you're asking for A SKU, I would recommend looking at this data, you may need SKU B. So that ensures that we are able to meet the demand far better. Similarly, pulling this data into, forecasting from a long-term perspective. What are the trends, and should I build up my inventory if the shift in commodity prices is happening? So a whole lot of that can come together. And that is one piece that I believe will help us. So a lot of investments is going into building infrastructure from end to end, digitizing our processes, which will improve not just financial, but overall health of the organization and responding far better as we move now.
Take the same question to Lalit. You're also the CFO of Dabur, so you know where the money is going. So you tell us, are you also in sync with what Tarun is saying? Is that where your investments are going, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would agree that, all the above that points that have been talked about in this questionnaire are relevant here. The percentage may vary. And I would certainly agree with him that, today's scenario is not only just to have a real financial information available for the purpose of business health, but also to take decisions for future. So whether, the decision is to make or buy, whether decision is to launch a new product, whether it is decision that you want to talk on the CapEx versus OpEx, I think the real-time data enables the management to take decision faster, and speed of execution is key. Even the other point that they talked about on the moving on the cloud is primarily also to ensure the continuity. What if any server which is localized gets either damaged or something? The security that is available on the cloud is comparatively much better, though there is a difference from CapEx to OpEx. But I think in today's scenario, speed of execution, security, and enabling for decision-making for future is the key priority for the business. So therefore, I would say that these are all very much important, and robotic process automation, again, is very important because that's where it will take away the compilation time and give enough time to the management for decision-making and analytics. So that is going to be the trend going forward. And therefore, the differential competitive advantage of the organization will depend upon how much investment in the technology one wants to make. And that's what will make the difference in the organization. So I would certainly agree, and in fact, go more emphasis on that all the parameters are very important and critical. Maybe percentage can vary from industry to industry.
Right. I'll go to Mr. Suri with the same question. Your investment priorities. Mr. Suri, there are also several questions for you. I'll take one here, which will feed into the same question, which is, what about inventory management? Do you think you require more digitization of that process? Is technology required there? Because your products have low shelf life.
Yeah, the product has low shelf life, but I think where I would place my money today is to get to understand, like farm to home. That's what the dream is, that you know from farm to home. You know where the farmer is taking, milk the cow today, and that's where you capture it, and the quality of the milk is perfect. And from there, the structure flows through to the home where you could know, there's a person who drops the milk at your house, and he does it every day by the way. This data is the most stable data. By the way, I see a lot of my friends sitting here, and I can say that everybody has different sales on different days. I have the same sale almost every day. I mean, nothing changes. I mean, other than some festival or something, I mean, the number is the same every day because everybody's house gets that milk packet every day. So when you look from that perspective, if I can get to visualize this entire piece from the start to the end, and this all happens in 3 days maximum. So, if you can get that, and we are already, like I told you, working with the farmers. We've gone to 6,000 farmers, 80,000 liters a day is visualized completely like this. We are expanding that aggressively. So that's one side of it. And right now, from the trade part of it, I would say India still struggles with this. We reach as far as probably the retailers, billing to retailers is what we reach. We can't reach consumers yet. We reach billing to retailers. E-com has, expanded dramatically, and e-com is giving us, data visibility up to some, not to us, but more to the B2B companies which are there, which are having that visibility. But largely, that's the chain which we are trying to invest in. And I think I would reiterate the point which everybody has made. The whole thing is about decision making. It's not about collecting a lot of data. It's like everything is in my computer. I mean, that's great, but the computer doesn't take any decisions. So you need that thing to come out in such a way that you do something about it. I think that part is the most crucial. So I would,
in fact, we have run out of time. It's 5:30 and we have already crossed time, but it would be unfair for me not to take quick views from Angelo and Sanjay on the same question. Angelo, you want to tell us a little bit about your technology plans and what is more important for you in technology integration? Since we have less time, sorry, but you could just keep it short.
I think for us, like I discussed earlier, during the pandemic, we managed to get connected with consumers directly in a very big way. Now, the important piece was to put all this together from all these touch points into one data platform. So you're able to kind of profile the consumers and target them through a personalized communication. That's the most important piece. So your marketing campaign finally should become far more efficient, and the cost of consumer acquisition and retention for us should kind of come down. Now, understanding the consumer preference is absolutely crucial for enabling this.
Right.
And I'll tell you the reason why. In some of the cases, when we actually launched our e-commerce platform, we understood that whoever is moving into the e-commerce platform for the first time and engaging with us, if you give him a great experience, wonderful, he stays with you. But if you give him a bad experience, that's it. So it's a make or break in that sense in terms of equations and relationships.
Right.
So we put a lot of premium on this, that consumer data and relationship and engagement is going to be extremely crucial for the future. Yeah. But however, when we're embarking on this journey, we are also very clear that we would respect the privacy concerns of consumers and would have the systems to safeguard the information which they are sharing with us. So that is something which is paramount, and we are associating ourselves with the kind of appropriate partners who will give us this facility.
I'll go to Mr. Sacheti very quickly on this. Your investment priorities in technology.
Yeah, first is
technology. The second piece, sorry, I think.
Sure, go ahead.
The first was technology. The second piece, we are positive about outlook on future. Right. So as we speak, our manufacturing capacities are being enhanced. So we are confident that things will keep improving, and we will require more capacities to feed the business. So that's where I would leave it.
Okay, Mr. Sacheti.
Right. So I think going forward, considering what we have already invested in the last 3 years in terms of accounting, data, analytics, we have done a lot of investments in the last 2-3 years. But going forward, a big part of the investments would go into monitoring the farms under our programs. So seeing the impact in terms of the sustainability and traceability related practices, and monitoring the impact on farmer livelihoods. So how are we creating that impact there? So digitalizing this entire part is where investments would go. Secondly, would be given the theme right now, where it is about disintermediation and dealing directly with the farmers. How do you digitize the whole process of directly dealing with farmers, buying directly from them, contracting, payments, the entire loop? That is the second part. Third part, which would always be, which is an ongoing thing, which is the internal efficiencies oriented investments, which would be in digitalizing manufacturing related areas, human resource related areas, where all the touch points which employees have with the organization, how do you automate a good part of that? The third one would be typically in the customer facing part, because we are a largely B2B organization. There we deal with key accounts, and now we have started going to tier 2, tier 3 customers, where there is a lot of fragmentation of customers. That's where we need to digitalize to bring in the right efficiencies, and that's where investments would go. I would say we have already invested in cloud. We have already invested in accounting, business analysis related automation, and that investment is an incremental investment which would happen every year.
Fantastic. And with that, we come to the end of our panel discussion. But there are two quick things still remaining. One small quick wrap up from Sudakshina on what are the key takeaways today, and we need to take a smiling group screenshot. So can all of us look into the camera? My colleague Nidhi Kapoor is at the back end. She's going to take the photograph. Look into your camera and say cheese. Nidhi, tell us when you're done.
Done. Thank you.
Sudakshina?
Yeah.
Quick wrap up. And then
yes, sure. So thank you so much to all the panelists. I think, the technology is indeed really shaping the future of each of your businesses. And, and we are glad and privileged to be your technology partner in driving, like better outcomes, not just for the respective companies that you lead, but also I think for India as a whole, because, I think this industry is a critical industry that is, that is responsible for reducing the inequality that exists in consumption across different strata of the society. And I think together, with technology and your leadership vision and drive, we can achieve that. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you very much to all of you for taking the time out. Thank you to my co-moderator, Alokesh Bhattacharyya. You've been wonderful. Thank you to SAP for giving us this opportunity. Thanks to all of you.